What would you do if you showed up to your own daughter's wedding, only to find a sign at the entrance with your faces and the words, "Do not let these two in"? The decision we made in that moment changed everything, and the real reason behind that sign. You'll never guess what happened next. It was one of those rare, golden Saturdays in late spring, the kind that makes you believe the universe is rooting for you. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and there was just enough breeze to keep my hair from sticking to my lipstick. Walt and I had been up since dawn, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. I'd spent the morning fussing over my hair, smoothing out the teal dress Harper had picked for me. Her something blue, she'd joked, and I'd laughed, even though I knew she'd chosen it because it made me look slimmer and, as she put it, classy mom, not frumpy. I'd even let her talk me into those shoes with the little kitten heels, the ones I swore would be the death of me by the end of the night. Walt, for his part, looked handsome in his suit, though he grumbled about the tie. "It's just a piece of fabric, Walt," I'd said, rolling my eyes, but secretly I loved that he still wanted to look his best for our girl. We drove to the venue in near silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I kept glancing at him, wondering if he was remembering the day Harper was born, the first time she called him Daddy, or the time she broke her arm falling off her bike and insisted he be the one to carry her into the ER. I know I was. My heart was a jumble of pride, nostalgia, and a little bit of sadness. How did the years go by so fast? Wasn't it just yesterday she was playing dress up in my old wedding veil, parading around the living room with her teddy bear as the groom? Now here we were, about to watch her marry the love of her life, and I was determined not to cry until at least the second verse of "Here Comes the Bride." As we pulled into the parking lot, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The venue was even more beautiful than I remembered from the rehearsal dinner. White chairs lined up in perfect rows, flowers everywhere, and a little archway at the entrance covered in Harper's favorite peonies. I squeezed Walt's hand and he squeezed back, both of us smiling like fools. We walked up the path, my heels clicking on the stone, and I could feel the eyes of a few early guests on us. I straightened my shoulders, determined to look every bit the proud mother of the bride. But then, just as we reached the entrance, everything changed. There, right by the door, was a giant easel with a photo on it. Not just any photo, a photo of us. Walt and me from last Christmas, both of us wearing those ridiculous matching sweaters Harper had given us as a joke. I remember that day so clearly. Walt's sweater had a reindeer with a light-up nose, and mine said Santa's favorite. We'd laughed so hard and Harper had snapped the picture, saying she wanted to remember us, just like this. But now that photo was blown up to poster size, and underneath it, in big bold letters, was a sign that read, "Do not let these two in." For a moment, I just stood there frozen. My brain couldn't quite process what I was seeing. Was this some kind of joke? Did we accidentally crash the wrong wedding? I looked at Walt, and he looked at me, his eyebrows raised so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. I half expected someone to jump out from behind a bush with a camera, shouting, "Surprise! You're on candid camera!" But no one did. The guests milling around the entrance seemed oblivious, chatting and laughing, not even glancing at the sign. I felt my cheeks flush, a hot wave of embarrassment washing over me. Was this Harper's idea of a prank? Or worse, was it serious? Had we done something to upset her, something so unforgivable that she didn't want us at her wedding? My mind raced through every conversation we'd had in the past year, every disagreement, every awkward silence. Had I been too opinionated about the guest list? Had Walt's teasing about her fiance's job gone too far? I tried to remember if there had been any signs, any hints that she was angry with us, but nothing came to mind. We'd helped her plan every detail, written checks for the caterer and the florist, even let her have the wedding at the country club instead of the church, just like she wanted. I glanced at Walt again, searching his face for answers, but he just shook his head, looking as bewildered as I felt. For a split second, I considered marching right in, demanding to know what was going on. But then I thought about the guests, the whispers, the stares. I couldn't bear the thought of making a scene, of ruining Harper's day, even if she apparently wanted nothing to do with us. So, without a word, Walt and I turned around and walked back to the car. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the keys out of my purse. We sat there in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over us like a heavy blanket. I wanted to cry, to scream, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Instead, I just stared out the window, watching as the guests filed into the venue, none of them noticing the two people who were supposed to be at the center of it all, now sitting alone in the parking lot. Walt reached over and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In that moment, all the excitement, all the joy I'd felt just minutes before, vanished, replaced by a cold, gnawing fear. What had we done to deserve this? And more importantly, what would we do now? Now, let me ask you, what would you do in that moment? Would you storm back in, heels clicking with righteous indignation, demanding an explanation in front of all those guests? Or would you do what Walt and I did, turn around, get back in the car, and drive away in stunned, wounded silence? I wish I could say I was brave, that I marched right up to the wedding planner or Harper's best friend and demanded to know what on earth was going on. But the truth is, I felt so blindsided, so utterly humiliated, that all I wanted was to disappear. Walt opened the car door for me, his face set in that stoic, stubborn way he gets when he's hurt but doesn't want to show it. We slid into our seats, the car suddenly feeling much smaller than it had that morning, and for a long moment, neither of us said a word. I stared straight ahead, my hands clenched in my lap, the teal fabric of my dress bunched up and wrinkled, and I thought about all the times I'd imagined this day, how I'd pictured Harper beaming at us from the altar, how I'd planned to give her a little wink as she walked down the aisle, just like my mother had done for me. Instead, here we were, sitting in the parking lot, our daughters' faces plastered on a sign that told the world we weren't welcome. The engine hummed quietly as Walt started the car, and we pulled out of the lot, the venue growing smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel the questions piling up in my mind, each one heavier than the last. Did we do something wrong? Was this Harper's idea of a twisted joke, or had we somehow become the villains in her story without even realizing it? I replayed every conversation we'd had in the months leading up to the wedding, searching for a clue, a warning sign I might have missed. Had I been too opinionated about the guest list, too insistent on the flower arrangements? Had Walt's teasing about her fiancé's job finally crossed a line? I thought about the last time we'd all had dinner together, how Harper had seemed distracted, checking her phone every few minutes, and how I'd brushed it off as pre-wedding nerves. Was there something more to it? Was she angry with us, or worse, ashamed of us? The car ride home was the quietest 45 minutes of our lives. Usually Walt and I would fill the drive with small talk, complaints about traffic, jokes about the radio, plans for what we'd do after the wedding. But this time, the only sound was the steady hum of the tires on the road and the occasional sniffle I tried to hide behind my hand. I glanced over at Walt, hoping for some sign that he was as confused and hurt as I was, but he just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, that might make sense of what had just happened, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I let my mind wander, spiraling through every possible explanation, each one more painful than the last. Maybe Harper had decided she didn't want us there after all. Maybe she'd been harboring some secret resentment, some grudge I'd never even noticed. Or maybe, just maybe, this was all some elaborate prank gone horribly wrong, a joke that had missed its mark and left us standing on the outside looking in. I'll admit a small part of me wanted to laugh. I mean, who puts up a "do not let these two in" sign at their own wedding? It was so absurd, so out of character for Harper, that I almost convinced myself it had to be a mistake. But the fear, the deep, aching fear that we'd lost our daughter forever, was stronger than any urge to find humor in the situation. As we pulled into our driveway, the house looked different, colder, emptier, as if it already knew we wouldn't be coming home with stories of a beautiful ceremony and a joyful celebration. Walt turned off the engine, but neither of us moved to get out. We just sat there, the weight of the day pressing down on us, making it hard to breathe. I thought about calling Harper, about demanding an explanation, but the thought of hearing her voice, of possibly confirming my worst fears, was too much to bear. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the car window. The makeup I'd so carefully applied that morning now smudged and streaked, my eyes red and puffy. I wondered what the neighbors would think if they saw us sitting there, dressed to the nines but looking like we'd just come from a funeral. Maybe, in a way, we had. The funeral of the relationship I thought I had with my daughter, the end of the family I'd worked so hard to build. Walt finally broke the silence, his voice barely more than a whisper. Maybe we should have stayed. Maybe we should have asked someone what was going on. I shook my head, tears spilling over despite my best efforts to hold them back. I couldn't, Walt. I just couldn't. He nodded, and for the first time, I saw the pain in his eyes, the same pain I felt in my own heart. We sat there for a long time, neither of us ready to face the empty house, the empty future that suddenly seemed to stretch out before us. I thought about all the things I wanted to say to Harper, all the questions I needed answered, but most of all, I thought about how much I missed her, my little girl, my best friend, the person I'd always believed would never shut me out. The fear of losing her, of never getting the chance to make things right, was almost more than I could bear. And so we sat side by side, two parents lost in a sea of doubt and heartbreak, waiting for a sign, a phone call, anything that might bring our daughter back to us. 3 hours later, just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees and cast long shadows across the living room, the phone finally rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin, the shrill sound slicing through the heavy silence that had settled over the house. Walt and I both stared at the phone for a split second, as if it were some kind of wild animal that might bite, and then I snatched it up, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. "Hello." My voice sounded small, uncertain, nothing like the confident mother of the bride I'd imagined I'd be today. On the other end, I heard Harper's voice, shaky and thin, threaded with panic. "Mom, where are you? The ceremony's about to start, and you're not here!" For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, the words caught in my throat, my mind racing to make sense of what I was hearing. Was this some kind of cruel joke? Had she really not noticed we were missing until now? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and told her about the sign, the giant photo of Walt and me at the entrance. "Do not let these two in," plastered underneath for all the world to see. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end, so thick I could almost hear her heart pounding. Then, a sharp gasp, followed by a flurry of muffled voices and footsteps. I could picture her, standing in the back room of the venue, her hair perfectly curled, her dress pristine, her whole life about to change, and suddenly, everything crashing down around her. "Oh my God, Mom, no, that wasn't supposed to happen," she finally blurted out, her voice breaking. "It was a joke, just a stupid joke from college. My friends put it up as a prank. They never thought you'd see it, let alone take it seriously. I'm so sorry." I could hear the tears in her voice, the raw, desperate regret, and for a moment, all the anger and confusion I'd been carrying melted away, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. How could something so small, so seemingly harmless, have gone so horribly wrong? As she tried to explain, her words tumbled over each other, frantic and apologetic. She told me about the inside joke from her freshman year, how she and her friends had once been kicked out of a party for being too loud, and ever since, they'd joked about being the unwanted guests. They'd thought it would be funny to put up a sign at the wedding, a little nod to their wild college days, never imagining it would be the first thing Walt and I saw when we arrived. "I didn't even know they'd used your picture," she sobbed. "I thought it would just be a silly sign in the back, not right at the entrance. I'm so sorry, Mom. I never wanted to hurt you." I listened, my heart breaking for her, for us, for the day that was supposed to be perfect and had instead become a tangled mess of misunderstandings and hurt feelings. I wanted to be angry, to yell at her for being so careless, but all I could feel was a deep, overwhelming love for my daughter and a desperate need to make things right. I told her it was okay, that we understood, that sometimes things just go wrong in the most spectacular ways. But as I spoke, I could hear the devastation in her voice, the way her breath hitched and her words faltered. "I can't do it, Mom," she whispered. "I can't walk down the aisle without you and Dad. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like my wedding." The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket, and I realized, in that moment, just how much we meant to her, how much our presence, our love, was woven into the fabric of her life. All the little arguments, the misunderstandings, the moments of doubt, they all faded away, replaced by a fierce, unbreakable bond that no sign, no joke could ever destroy. Walt sat beside me, listening to every word, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight, and together we tried to comfort our daughter, to reassure her that we loved her, that we forgave her, that nothing, absolutely nothing, could ever come between us. But the damage had been done. The guests were confused, the ceremony delayed, and Harper, my beautiful, strong, stubborn girl, was crumbling under the weight of it all. She told me how she'd tried to go through with it, how she'd stood at the back of the room, book-eyed in hand, waiting for the music to start, but every time she looked toward the aisle, all she could see was the empty seats where Walt and I should have been. "I kept waiting for you to walk in, Mom," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I thought maybe you were just running late, or maybe you'd gone to fix your hair or something. But when the planner came in and said you'd left, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get married without you there." The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This day, this moment, meant as much to her as it did to us. It wasn't about the flowers or the dress or the perfect photos. It was about family, about love, about being together in the moments that matter most. As we sat there, the three of us connected by a fragile thread of heartbreak and hope, I felt something shift inside me. The fear and anger that had threatened to consume me all day gave way to a deep, abiding gratitude for the love we shared, for the chance to make things right, for the reminder that even the most carefully planned days can go off the rails. And that's okay. Life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes downright absurd, but it's also beautiful and precious and worth fighting for. Harper apologized again and again, her words tumbling out in a rush, but I stopped her, telling her that what mattered most was that we were together, that we could start over, that there would be other moments, other memories, other chances to celebrate the love that bound us together. As I hung up the phone, Walt pulled me into a hug, and for the first time all day, I let myself cry, not out of sadness, but out of relief and love and the knowledge that, no matter what, we would always find our way back to each other. That night, after the phone call that had left us all raw and exposed, Walt and I found ourselves driving back across town, the city lights blurring past as we made our way to Harper's apartment. The wedding venue was long since emptied, the guests having drifted away in confusion or quiet sympathy, and the cake, oh the cake, was probably sitting untouched in some lonely corner, a silent witness to the day's chaos. I remember thinking, As we pulled up to Harper's place, how strange it was that after all the planning, all the lists and fittings and tastings, it had come down to this, just the three of us. No fancy decorations, no music, no crowd. My heart was pounding as we climbed the stairs, Walt's hand warm and steady in mine, and when Harper opened the door, I barely recognized her. Her hair was still pinned up, but a few curls had escaped, framing her face in a way that made her look both older and heartbreakingly young. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup smudged, and she was still wearing her wedding dress, though she'd kicked off her shoes and was standing barefoot on the hardwood floor. For a moment, none of us spoke. We just stood there, staring at each other, the weight of the day pressing down on us. And then, as if on cue, we all burst into tears, big, ugly, cathartic sobs that shook our shoulders and made us laugh through the snot and the mess of it all. We hugged like we hadn't seen each other in years, clinging to one another as if we could squeeze all the pain and confusion out of our bodies and replace it with love. The apologies came next, tumbling out in a rush. Harper for the sign, for the joke gone wrong, for not checking in sooner, Walt for not marching back in and demanding answers, me for leaving without a word, for letting my fear get the best of me. There was a little bit of yelling too, because, let's be honest, what's a family reunion without someone raising their voice? I told Harper how hurt I'd been, how lost I'd felt sitting in that car, and she told me how terrified she'd been when she realized we were gone, how she'd stood at the back of the venue, bouquet trembling in her hands, unable to take a single step without us there. Walt, ever the peacemaker, cracked a joke about how at least we'd saved money on the open bar. And for a moment, we all just laughed, real, belly-deep laughter that felt like a release, like a promise that we'd get through this together. We sat down in her tiny living room, the three of us crowded onto her old couch, and talked for hours. We talked about the wedding that wasn't, about the friends who'd meant well but missed the mark, about the ways we'd all let fear and pride get in the way of what really mattered. Harper told us how she'd tried to go through with the ceremony, how she'd looked out at the sea of faces and felt nothing but emptiness when she saw our seats were empty. It just didn't feel real without you, she said, her voice small and honest. I realized I didn't care about the flowers or the photos or the perfect day. I just wanted my family there. I squeezed her hand, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my bones. It was a lesson I'd learned before, in smaller ways, when she'd scraped her knee as a child and only wanted me to kiss it better, when she'd called home from college in tears over a bad grade or a broken heart. Family isn't about perfect moments or picture-perfect weddings. It's about showing up even when things go hilariously, heartbreakingly wrong. As the night wore on, we found ourselves sharing stories, some old, some new, some so embarrassing I thought Walt might actually die of laughter. We talked about our own wedding, how the cake had melted in the summer heat and the band had played the wrong song for our first dance. We remembered the time Harper had tried to bake cookies for her third-grade bake sale and set off the smoke alarm, and how we'd all ended up eating burnt chocolate chips and laughing until our sides hurt. We realized, sitting there in the soft glow of her living room lamp, that the best memories, the ones that stick with you, that become the stories you tell over and over, aren't the ones where everything goes according to plan. They're the ones where everything goes sideways, where you're forced to improvise, to lean on each other, to find the humor and the love in the mess of it all. I looked at Harper, her face flushed with laughter and relief, and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to my eyes. We'd survived the worst wedding disaster I could imagine, and come out the other side stronger, closer, more certain than ever that nothing, not a sign, not a misunderstanding, not even a day as disastrous as this one, could break the bond we shared. So, let me ask you, have you ever had a moment where everything went sideways, but it brought you closer in the end? Maybe it was a holiday dinner that ended in burnt turkey and takeout pizza, or a family vacation where you got lost and ended up discovering the best little diner in town. Maybe it was something bigger, something that shook you to your core, but in the end, reminded you of what really matters. I'd love to hear your stories, share them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories that remind us all sometimes the best memories come from the moments we never saw coming. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the perfect wedding, the perfect family, or the perfect life. It's about showing up, loving each other fiercely, and finding joy in the beautiful, unpredictable mess of it all.